Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about a very important step that I undertook in healing PTSD for myself. And so this video is called Understanding PTSD and How I Fought It. And this is step number 5, retraining my brain. And this is basically the 5th step and the 13-step foundation that I developed for myself to help myself heal from post-traumatic stress in healthy and natural ways, and I used it successfully. The details of this step and the other 13 steps and how I healed from post-traumatic stress and all the resources that I used to look all this information up that I talk about are all here in my book, The Sword and the Anvil, Definitive Guide for Natural Healthy Healing from Post-Traumatic Stress and Trauma. So, the first thing that I had to learn or had to understand was that my brain or my responses to trauma were learned. Okay? What I mean by that is I learned that my brain was trained to react to my trauma through training, if you want to call it that, from my parents, from society, from the Marines, events of my life. And once I understood that, I then understood that my brain was actually learning or being taught to react to certain stimuli that I perceived as dangerous to save my life. So it was reacting, and it would react to these certain stimuli in a certain way to protect me, to save our life, or to save my life. And then as I thought about it, and thought about everything that I had been through, everything that had happened, not only with my trauma, but with the PTSD, I realized that my brain was actually recording everything in my environment that was going on at the time of the trauma. So it records such things as noises, smells, colors, plants, animals, people, events. And so I realized, and through doing some research on human beings and our brains and how we work, I realized that my brain was doing this so that when I encountered these stimuli again in the future, that these learned responses that I had would kick into action and take control of my actions. Again, all designed in order to save my life. And where this comes from really is, I'm sure a lot of you have heard this, is our fight or flight response. It's a characteristic that human beings have had since their inception, okay? Since the dawn of man. And it's designed to protect us, right? To keep us out of harm's way. As human beings, I should say, we have the ability to, turn this on or off, so to speak. So if something happens, we go in the fight or flight, it's over, and we can turn it off and go about our normal day. Whereas with animals, they have the same fight or flight response, but they pretty much live in that state 100% of their time. And they don't have the ability to turn it off. Now with human beings, I realize that if we can't turn this off, we're stuck. We're stuck in that fight or flight response, which means we're stuck in our trauma, i.e. PTSD. And that's what happens when an individual, and I realized with myself, going through repeated traumas, such as combat when I was in the Marines and all that, and the other things, events in my life, throughout most of my life, my young life, it happens so often, your brain just keeps kicking into that, and I stayed in that fight or flight mode. A good example of what I'm talking about with your brain learning responses to certain stimuli, recording them, and then these learned responses kicking in and taking over is with Pavlov's dogs. So Pavlov he had these dogs, he took them, and I'm just going to break this all down instead of going long, lengthy details about his experiment. But what he did was he took several dogs and he would start ringing bells. When he was done ringing the bells, he would feed them. And pretty much what happened over time is that he would just start ringing the bells, and all of a sudden the dogs would just start salivating, because they knew food. They had learned that when they hear that sound, that stimuli, food is coming. Just like I learned when I heard gunshots, I either need to take cover or fire back or both, or run, or whatever the deal may be. So, and with his experiment, he then moved on to other noises besides the bells and achieved the same results. So that's a good example. If you want more details about it, just Google Pavlov's dogs and you'll find out what I'm talking about. So, after realizing these things, I learned, just as Pavlov's dogs are an example of, that every time these stimuli caused me to react in a certain way, my brain re-recorded the environment that I was in. And so basically what it was doing was building like a trauma database, so that anytime I encountered these things, no matter where I was, these learned responses to these stimuli would kick in. And what I'm getting at, an example of that was, like I said, when Pavlov moved from the bells to other sounds. So basically, you can have a traumatic event happen in one environment, okay, and your brain records it, and records the noises, smells, sounds, all those things. Then you move to another environment, it's a completely different environment. You might go, say, you might be out in the desert, might go into a grocery store, but you'll maybe encounter some of the same noises, smells, scenes, whatever, people. You're going to go back into that fight or flight, or have your panic attack, or whatever it is you want to call it, and then your brain is going to re-record that whole environment. So now this new environment inside the grocery store, or wherever you are, is going to get recorded. And all those things that are in there now become part of your trauma. At least that was my case. And I learned that through going through these experiences. And what I mean, and so basically what happens is your trauma, the longer you don't deal with it, the more and more layers you get to it. It builds. Like, just sort of think of it like a scallion, right? So say you have this, like this, take this piece of paper, say this is a skinny little green scallion growing out of the ground, right? And what happens over time? It grows in layers and layers and layers and layers till you get a full-blown onion. And I realized that that's what happened with me, my trauma, because I didn't deal with it for 20 years or so, 25 years. And then realized that I had a lot of layers to deal with. And then I also realized that what I'm going to need to do when I approach this healing is that I'm going to have to take it one layer at a time, because I just knew if I tried to do it all at once, just like with anything, you start an exercise program, anything like that, diet, you try to do all at once, you end up failing because you get overwhelmed. That's just normal. And like the old saying goes, Rome was not built in a day. So I realized that, hey, I'm going to have to do this in layers. It's one piece at a time, and it takes time. Hence, that's why I developed the 13-step foundation, because it allowed me to take this healing process one step at a time, one layer at a time. So after I'd realized all these things and learned all these things, I got to a certain point where I was going to have to retrain my brain. And what I mean is that I had to take control of my life instead of succumbing to the PTSD and the trauma and it controlling me. I realized that I was going to have to do that. I was going to have to take that control back if I was going to heal. And so I realized that, okay, I've learned that my brain has learned these responses to these certain stimuli. So I figured, well, if my brain could learn it the first time, or if it could be trained to have those responses, then why can't it be trained to have different responses to the same stimuli? Just as an athlete trains him or herself to conduct their sport. What do? They train over and over and over and over again, so it becomes muscle memory, right? So I figured, well, I'm going to approach this the same way that an athlete would approach training for a game or training for their event. And I was going to retrain my brain to have different positive, healthy responses to these very same stimuli that were causing me problems. And I'll give you a couple examples of what I did. So one of the things that I had a problem with was the color orange. I woke up one morning, I've told this story before in some of my other videos, opened the blinds, sun came in, orange glow in the room, and I started panicking. So I had to sit down and figure out why I was panicking. And I realized, well, the one thing that was different, the thing that changed right before I started to panic was the color of the room, that orange glow. I thought, okay, why would orange bother me? So I figured out, well, orange was the color of the sunrise and the sunset in the desert when I was in the war. It was the color of the explosions at night, fire, all those sorts of things that I saw. So I realized, okay, it's bringing me back to the war and causing me to panic from this learned database that I had. So, okay, I'm going to retrain my brain to have a different response to this color orange. So what I did is I would start going in my room every day. And because of the orange in the room, my room now became part of my trauma too. And so when I started dealing with it, I'd start going in my room and I'd start panicking right away, even if it wasn't orange. So I said, okay, and that's basically when I said I got to retrain my brain. So I went in there, I'd go in there and I'd conduct peaceful things like I'd meditate, I'd listen to relaxing music, I'd read, maybe play the guitar or something, or write. As you know, I like to write. And so these are all peaceful things to me. And it took time, just like it takes time for an athlete to develop his or her skills. It took time to do it, but eventually I overcame the color orange and I overcame the fact that my room panicked. So that now when I go into my room, or even when I achieved this back then, my brain perceived it as a peaceful thing. So there's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. But basically, what I was doing was I was taking back what my trauma had took from me, which basically was, my peace and my freedom. And then it was at that point that I realized that in my life there was things that I had to shed. And these were things that numbed my existence or poisoned me or gave me a false sense of reality. And for me, at the time I had been going to a doctor, whatever, I was on 7 different kinds of medication, and it had gotten bad, and I was drinking and those sorts of things. So I realized that I got to get rid of that stuff, because for me it just seemed like those things just took me further from my source of energy and peace by more or less providing a barrier between me and those things. And in essence, what that did is it kept me disconnected from happiness, from peace, my energy, and it kept me in that state of trauma. Almost like, for me, taking those things there was a wall right there, and it was preventing me from moving any further. And it seemed like the only way I could go at the time, when I was in the depths of my depression and PTSD, is like it just kept taking more medicine and drinking more alcohol. So I was sitting there thinking about it as I realized it. I said, I'm just causing another vicious cycle in my life. I've got to quit it and get rid of that stuff. So that's what I did. And as a lot of my followers know from past videos, that I got off all the medication and quit drinking, all those sorts of things, and I started to work on getting healthy. Hence, that will lead to step number 6 that I conducted. So, and it was at that point that I realized, okay, now I got to move to the next step, or get rid of the next layer because really those things were caused by my trauma. And now I'm, for those of you that are maybe doing some of those things, like now I can go out to dinner or have a nice dinner and have a glass of wine or two and be done with it. I'm fine. I don't use it to create a false sense of relaxation or peace. It's just something that I enjoy. And eventually you may be able to get back to, to doing those sorts of things. And that's kind of what I figured when I did it. And I've maintained the healthy habits and all those sorts of things. So there was a lot of benefits, not to healing the PTSD, not just getting rid of it, but there was a lot of other health benefits that came out of it as well. So to finish up, there's a few things I want to mention. First, as always with these steps, I've developed acronyms to sort of help myself remember them. And so this one, retraining my brain, so the acronym is retrain. So we have R, reversing, E, everything, T, the, R, reactions, A, and, I, internal, and nightmares. So retrain, reversing everything, the reactions and the internal nightmares. And that's basically what I was doing. And please don't forget to follow my channel, share and like my videos. It's not much, but it helps me out and it helps me to keep doing what I'm doing, so I would appreciate that. Also, check out my links in the drop-down window, and also please check out my books. There's links there to check out the information on them. And then also stay tuned for my next video, which I sort of led into with step number 6, where I got healthy. And with that, good luck. I wish everyone well, and I'm out.